Lots of people feed their cat in a way that's not best for them. It can lead to behaviour problems or make existing problems worse. Now, I know you think I'm going to say free feeding. That's not what I'm going to say. I'm a cat behaviourist, and in my experience, the worst way you can feed your cat is giving them breakfast and dinner. I'm going to tell you why I believe this to be true and a different way to feed your cats. But first of all, if you have no problems with your cat's food, if you don't feel inclined to change the way that they're fed, if you're not seeing any problems with their behaviour, then please don't feel any pressure to change it. Like, every cat's an individual, and what's working for your cat might not work for somebody else, and vice versa. So as long as they're physically healthy, and as long as you're not seeing any behaviour problems associated with food that I'm going to talk through, then just carry on doing what you're doing. It's fine. So the reason why I find this particular schedule so problematic is because it's so far removed from what cats naturally want. So naturally, cats will eat little and often, and that they'll be catching small prey items all throughout the day and night when they're not sleeping. And they don't have a set meal schedule like we do. We have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but we don't even give them the lunch, do we? They just have the breakfast and dinner. So they're used to, like, biologically, they're set up to have small meals throughout the day. Also, they like to be in control of that. So when they're living on their own, they decide when to hunt, they go out and do that, and it's up to them to find their own food. Remember that for later, because they haven't lost that sort of mental idea of they're in control of where their food comes from. When we give breakfast and dinner, we're putting it on a very fixed schedule with two massive pieces of time in between where they're not getting any food. So some cats are totally fine with this, they're used to it, and you're not seeing any problems. So that's good, that's fine. But for some cats, they don't really cope well with this period, and we're like adding in a heavy dose of frustration and anxiety. For these cats that are so used to finding their own food, biologically, innately, then they're wondering now where to get this food. What you'll find with these cats is, if your cat's used to it, then fine, you might not have an issue. But it lends itself to cats that either eat just a little bit because they just want that little bit of meal and then they want to come back later. And then you'll be worried that they're not eating enough, or there's changes in their appetite and they're not getting as much as they need. Or you'll find cats that absolutely scoff the whole lot because they've waited so long that now they just hoover it all up in one go. Neither of these is the way that we want our cats to be eating in a 24-hour period. Feeding this way also makes a really big deal out of mealtime because it's such an important part of the day and emotions are running high. So in a multi-cat household, what you'll find here is that all cats come running down at breakfast or at dinner time because they're desperate for that food. They've gone hours and hours with nothing and they're ready for that now. So emotions are running high, the anticipation when you're getting it ready on the side, and they're just desperate for it to come down. These emotions can lead to aggression between the cats. So they might not want to be this close. They wouldn't choose to spend this sort of time together, but they all want the food in the same place at the same time. So you might see they might swipe at each other, they might be hissing, might just be rubbing up against each other in the wrong way. So we don't really want to create this situation. This is like a man-made problem that we've created by making two really important times of the day where they all come together at once. Also, if this is happening twice a day, every day, then it removes the scope for them getting on the rest of the time because there's not much time going past with no issue. There's always a little bit of fighting or a little bit of tension. So that can cause things to spiral in a negative direction. This can also be a problem in a single cat household too, because your cat will know exactly when meal times are and they will become super determined to get you to the point where you're giving them some food, that their behaviour can be quite problematic. So for example, they might become quite unsettled, they might vocalise at you, they might be walking all over your laptop, they might become quite destructive, trying to get your attention and prompt you to get them their food. So that can be quite difficult to see. But also, if you feed them in the morning as soon as you get up, then we can create problems overnight as well, because they know in the morning all they're worried about is getting you to get up and get them that food. So they take it upon themselves to make that happen, which is totally natural, because if you remember, when they're free living, they are finding their own food. It is their responsibility to find their food. So they have a way of doing that now in the house, in that if they meow enough, you might get up and feed them. And at the beginning, we do, because it might only be 5 minutes before the alarm goes off. And so we're like, oh, that's fine, that's not a problem, go down and feed them. Whereas now that they've made that connection, and so tomorrow it's a little bit earlier, and the next day it's a little bit earlier, until your cat's now waking you up at 4 a.m. and you're having to get up, give them a little bit of food and come back to bed. Once they've got this mindset of they're able to prompt you to get them food, they become much more food scavenging as well. So you might be trying to eat a ham sandwich and you feel a little paw coming up at you trying to get that back. Or they might be going through the bins because they know that there's food in there. They feel like they have to find it and make that happen in some way or another. And we like reinforce that idea because we give them the food at the time when they are being difficult and they are being demanding and their behavior is annoying. So we accidentally reward it, and then it's a difficult habit to break. And finally, probably the biggest problem I see is that hour or so leading up to breakfast or dinner, they're super tetchy, they're in a mood, they're frustrated, they're waiting for that food to come down. So this can impact on any sort of behaviour problem. So most notably, I would say it is tension between cats. So they might say like the cats are fine throughout the day, but that hour leading up to meal times, they're so irritable, they're always fighting, or the hour before you get up in the morning, there's lots of fighting, there's lots of tension. So that's definitely been a pattern I've seen time and time again with cats that are fed a breakfast and a dinner. Another common problem linked to this is Euromarking. So Euromarking is usually a stress issue, but sometimes it's a frustration issue. So for example, like a cat that wants to go outside but can't, might spray around the cat flap. And a cat that wants food and it's not coming, or it's not coming quick enough, or it's not coming at a time when they expect, then that can lead to a bout of Euromarking too. So again, you might find that Euromarking, cats that spray, it might happen more leading up to meal times because it's just been too long with no food. So they're just waiting for that to happen, and that frustration is manifesting in Euromarking. So if you are experiencing any of these problems with your cat and you do feed a breakfast and dinner, then the first thing I would recommend you do is introduce a lunch and a supper. So what we're doing here is taking their normal amount of food for the day, so not giving them any more, but their normal daily amount, and splitting that into 4 portions rather than 2. So this is just going to reduce the amount of time going past with no food and sort of feed into that natural little and often feeding schedule that they naturally want. I realise this might not be practical for everyone if you're not home throughout the day, so what I would recommend here is using a feeder that opens at a set time. So this is really good because obviously you can set it to open at lunchtime or later on in the evening, but also it takes you out of the whole situation. So it can stop them from bugging you for food because they know regardless of what you're doing, that feeder is just going to open at a set time. So these can be really useful for stopping that demanding, attention-seeking behaviour. If your cat has dry food, then you might want to consider free feeding. So I'm not averse to this. In fact, I do find for a lot of cats, it does help that they have control of when they eat and how frequently. That can help for a lot. But what I would say here is make sure your cat is physically healthy. So keep in close touch with your vet, make sure they're at a healthy weight and that they do regulate their food well. So we don't want them overeating. And I would also say if you're in a multi-cat household, then I would recommend using a microchip feeder. So that's a little bowl with like a little ring up over the top, and it only opens for an individual cat. So you can set which cats can eat from which bowl. So that way, you know you can put down one day's amount, or you can weigh out how much they need, and then that cat will only eat from that bowl and your other cats will only eat from their bowls. So that can work really well in a multi-cat household. If neither of these work for you or your cat, then you might want to consider activity feeding. So you can give them their normal breakfast and dinner, but you can put it in a feeder that they have to actively engage with to get the food out. So it is easier with dry food because you can use like a food ball, which is like a round ball with holes in the edge. You can fill it with dry food. But you can get them with wet food too. So you can use a board with different pegs or a licky mat or something that just slows down the experience. So this is going to help lengthen out meal times and keep them engaged for longer. I'd actually recommend activity feeding for any feeding schedule, to be fair, because it's a nice source of enrichment and it does help change like boring meal times into something fun, and it stops them from scoffing. Just remember again though, if you're in a multi-cat household, you'll need plenty to go around because you don't want them fighting over the same feeder. So I hope that's been helpful in explaining why, in my experience, feeding a breakfast and dinner can introduce new behaviour problems or make existing problems worse. If you're experiencing fighting around the food bowls between your cats, then don't forget to watch this video, which explains why you should feed cats separately. And let me know in the comments what works for your cats. What do you feed them, how often, and how does it work? I will see you next week for another video. Take care.